Snow falls gently across a winding mountain highway in Southern California. It's early morning on February 10th, 1979, and Highway 243 cuts quietly through the San Gorgonio Pass. Pine trees line the road. The air is cold. The world feels still, almost frozen in time. Nothing about this place suggests violence. Nothing suggests urgency. But somewhere nearby, something has gone terribly wrong. Inside the Riverside County Sheriff's Station in Banning, a phone rings. A man is on the line. He tells the dispatcher that he has found a body off Highway 243 near a place called Poppet Flats Road. At first, this sounds like a routine call, but within seconds, the deputies notice something unusual. The man's tone is not shaken. He is not panicked. He is not emotional. Instead, he is argumentative, defensive. When asked what he found, he says he cannot even tell whether the body is male or female. He refuses to explain why he was in the area. He resists answering follow-up questions. Then, abruptly, he hangs up. Deputies exchange glances. They immediately dispatch units to the location. And within minutes, the quiet mountain road becomes the site of a discovery that will echo for more than 4 decades. Because lying just off the highway, partially concealed by snow, is the body of a 17-year-old girl. Her name is Esther Gonzalez. And the man who made that phone call, the man who reported finding her body, will soon convince investigators that he is innocent. He will pass a lie detector test. He will be cleared, and for 45 years he will live with a secret no one can prove, until science finally catches up.
This is the story of Esther Gonzalez. She was a daughter, a sister, a teenager remembered by her family as shy, gentle, and quietly funny. She was 17 years old when her life ended. It is also the story of an investigation, how early assumptions, imperfect tools, and limited technology allowed a killer to walk free for decades. And finally, it is a story about time, about how grief can last a lifetime, about how justice can be delayed, and about how science can one day give a voice to evidence that has been silent for years. For 45 years, Esther's family waited for answers. They never imagined the truth would lead back to the man who said he found her. This is a true story.
In 1979, Beaumont and Banning, California, were modest communities tucked into the San Gorgonio Pass, roughly 80 miles east of Los Angeles. They were not isolated rural towns, but they weren't large cities either. They existed somewhere in between, close-knit places where people recognized familiar faces and routines felt dependable. The two cities sat close together, close enough that walking between them was not unusual. Families lived ordinary lives here. Children went to school. Parents worked. Neighbors waved as they passed each other in driveways and grocery store aisles. It was in this environment that Esther Gonzalez grew up. Esther was the 4th of 7 children in the Gonzalez family. Those who knew her described her as quiet at first, but warm and humorous once she felt comfortable. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She was thoughtful, observant. She was especially close with her sister Elizabeth, who was just 1 year older. Their closeness came naturally, shared rooms, shared experiences, shared confidences. Elizabeth understood Esther in a way few others did. On Friday afternoon, February 9, 1979, Esther decided to walk from her parents' home in Beaumont to Elizabeth's house in Banning. It was an ordinary plan, a short walk along familiar roads. There was nothing reckless about it, nothing unusual. Esther left home expecting to arrive without incident. She never did. At first, the Gonzalez family was not immediately alarmed. Teenagers change plans. They stop to talk to friends. They linger. But as the afternoon turned into evening, concern began to grow. Esther had not called. She had not checked in. She had not shown up. This was out of character. Elizabeth waited. Her parents waited. As night fell, worry hardened into fear. Something was wrong. Family members began searching. They retraced the route Esther would have taken. They contacted friends and acquaintances. They asked around. No one had seen her. Somewhere between Beaumont and Banning, Esther Gonzalez had vanished. The night passed with no answers. And then morning came. On the morning of February 10, 1979, the Riverside County Sheriff's Station received the phone call that would define this case. An unidentified man reported finding a body off Highway 243. But the call did not sound like most emergency calls. The man was not distraught. He did not sound frightened. He sounded irritated. When deputies asked him for details, he resisted. When asked what he had found, he claimed he could not even determine whether the body was male or female. He gave a general location, snow off Highway 243 near Poppet Flats Road. Then he ended the call. Deputies responded immediately. Highway 243 runs through mountainous terrain, remote, forested, and in winter heavily snow-covered. It is not a place where people casually stop without reason. When deputies arrived, they found a body partially concealed by snow, lying just off the road. It was Esther Gonzalez. Investigators quickly recognized the severity of the crime. Esther had been sexually assaulted and murdered. This was not an accident. This was not a random misfortune. This was a deliberate act of violence. Detectives secured the scene and began collecting evidence. Every detail mattered. They documented footprints. They photographed the area. They collected biological evidence. Among that evidence were samples that would later become crucial. In 1979, DNA testing did not exist, but the investigators did something important. They preserved everything. They labeled it. They stored it. They documented it carefully. They knew that even if they could not solve the case now, the evidence might one day speak. From the very beginning, investigators were unsettled by the phone call that led them to Esther's body. Why had the caller been so uncooperative? Why refuse to explain why he was in the area? Why claim he could not tell the victim's gender when deputies on scene said the body was clearly identifiable as a young woman? These details mattered. The caller's behavior suggested something investigators often look for: control. Control over information, control over the narrative, control over how events are framed. Within days, investigators identified the caller. His name was Louis Randolph Williamson. Most people knew him as Randy, and what they learned next raised serious concern. Williamson was not a stranger passing through. He lived locally. He knew the area, and he knew the Gonzalez family. In fact, he had gone to high school with Esther's older brother. This was not a random discovery. This was someone connected to the victim's world. Randy Williamson agreed to speak with detectives. He told them that he had been driving along Highway 243 when he noticed something unusual in the snow. He said he pulled over to investigate and realized it was a body. He claimed he immediately contacted authorities, but his explanations lacked detail. Why was he driving there at that time? Why was his tone so hostile during the call? Why did his account feel incomplete? Detectives pressed him with questions. Williamson denied any involvement in Esther's death. So investigators made a decision. They asked him to take a polygraph test.
In 1979, polygraph tests were widely used by law enforcement as investigative tools. They were believed to provide insight into whether a person was being truthful. Polygraphs measure physiological responses, heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, and skin conductivity. The underlying theory is that deception produces stress, and stress produces measurable physical reactions. But polygraphs do not detect lies. They detect stress. An innocent person can fail a polygraph out of fear or anxiety. A guilty person can pass if they remain calm or believe they will not be caught. Williamson took the polygraph, and he passed. Based on that result, investigators officially cleared him. The man who found Esther's body was no longer a suspect. The investigation moved forward without him as a focus.
Without Williamson as a suspect, investigators pursued other leads. They interviewed potential witnesses. They examined anyone who might have crossed Esther's path. But there were no witnesses, no confirmed sightings, no forensic tools capable of identifying the perpetrator. The case slowed. Eventually, it went cold. Esther Gonzalez was laid to rest at Mountain View Cemetery in Beaumont. Her family grieved without answers. Elizabeth, Esther's sister, carried a heavy burden of guilt, wishing she had followed Esther that day, wishing she could undo the past. And while Williamson was officially cleared, some investigators never fully let go of their doubts. They simply had no way to prove anything. Life continued. Williamson joined the United States Marine Corps and later moved to Florida. He lived for decades after Esther's murder. Over the years, there were reports of assault allegations associated with him, but no convictions that would place his DNA into criminal databases. Meanwhile, forensic science evolved. DNA testing emerged in the 1980s and 1990s and quickly became a powerful tool in criminal investigations. Investigators developed a DNA profile from preserved evidence in Esther's case and entered it into CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database. There was no match. The person responsible had never been convicted of a qualifying offense. The case remained unsolved. In the years following 2018, forensic genetic genealogy changed everything. Instead of relying on criminal databases, investigators could now use genealogical databases to identify distant relatives of unknown suspects. This approach had famously identified the Golden State Killer. In 2023, the Riverside County Regional Cold Case Homicide Team decided to apply this technology to Esther Gonzalez's case. They sent evidence to Othram Inc., a forensic laboratory specializing in degraded DNA. Using advanced genome sequencing, scientists built a detailed genetic profile suitable for genealogical analysis. The results pointed investigators toward one name, Louis Randolph Williamson. There was one problem. Williamson had died in Florida in 2014. But investigators discovered that an autopsy had been performed and blood samples had been preserved. Those samples were transferred under strict chain of custody procedures. DNA was extracted and compared. The result was conclusive. Louis Randolph Randy Williamson was Esther Gonzalez's killer. After 45 years, the truth was undeniable. On November 20, 2024, the Riverside County District Attorney's Office announced the breakthrough. For Esther's family, the truth brought mixed emotions: relief, grief, and sadness that justice had come too late for accountability. Esther Gonzalez was 17 years old. For 45 years, her family waited for answers. In the end, science spoke. The man who tried to control the narrative with a phone call was exposed by DNA. Rest in peace, Esther Gonzalez.